Before we jump into today's episode, I want to tell you about something new and something cool that we just made for you. I wrote it myself. Now, here's my assumption. If you are listening to this podcast, it probably means that you want to build long-term wealth with a rental real estate portfolio, and you would probably like to do it with some creative financing. And as I talk to people who want to do that, I know a lot of questions come up, and I thought there's really no great single resource that really captures the entire picture of how that works. But I have solved that problem because I have written a new PDF that is just for you, and it's called the Step-by-Step Guide to Buying Your First or Next Rental Property Without Relying on a Lender to Approve You for a Loan. Like I said, I wrote this thing myself, and if I do say so myself, it's pretty thorough. And in this, you're going to learn a few things. I'm going to teach you about the 3 key strategies to find and negotiate quality off-market real estate deals that nobody else even knows are for sale. I'm going to teach you about what I call the yeses framework for getting off-market sellers to accept your offers. And then I'm also going to teach you the 11 simple steps that you need to take to get your first or your next deal accepted without needing to go to a bank and apply for a loan and just hope that they give it to you. So if you would like to get this free downloadable PDF, just go to rentalwealthguide.com and you can download it right now. rentalwealthguide.com and get your download of the step-by-step guide to buying your first or next rental property without relying on a lender to approve you for a loan. Now, on with the show. This is Jeff from A Thoughtful Real Estate Entrepreneur. Welcome to episode number 32 of Sleaze-Free Real Estate Investing, a show for those of us who've never felt at home in the We Buy Houses crowd. In this show, that we take a stand against what we call the lowbrow approach. This is the mainstream guru seminar, distressed seller approach that ends up giving real estate investors a slimy reputation. And instead, we discuss the strategies, the tactics, and the philosophies that we call the thoughtful way, an enlightened approach to real estate entrepreneurship that focuses on constantly sharpening the sophisticated real estate entrepreneur's 3 most critical capabilities: seller relation skills, deal architecture skills, and opportunity vision. When all 3 of these capabilities are successfully in motion, you can make an excellent living today and build long-term wealth while creating value for everybody that you touch along the way. We've got show notes for today's episode at www.thoughtfulre.com/E32. Please do yourself a big favor, and also it does us a huge favor by hitting the subscribe button in your podcast app. You might be listening right now and just be listening to this episode, but if you would hit that subscribe button, it would help everybody so much. Thank you so much for that. Now today, I've got for you an interview with a great entrepreneur and real estate investor who is a good friend of mine named Robb Crocker. What I love so much about Robb, besides his character as a person, is that he has built a really incredible portfolio of commercial real estate in small towns, and he's done it as not even his primary focus. He's been an entrepreneur with a whole nother business that was his primary focus, and on the side, slowly, one deal at a time, has built a great commercial real estate portfolio by focusing on revitalizing smaller town main streets. And so I'm super excited for you to hear his story, because you will see from this that you can make incredible strides in real estate investing through very realistic and doable deals, while it not necessarily being the thing you have to focus on the most. In this, we're going to talk about how you can actually 4x your wealth through real estate when you use it as owner-occupied business real estate for your own business. We're going to talk about some of the properties and attributes of working in small towns and some of the amazing opportunities that they provide, and main streets specifically. We're going to talk about opportunity zones, a brand new topic in the last couple of years for tax deferral. We're going to talk about seller financing and creative financing, and just the idea in general of being an entrepreneur in the real estate space. So I hope you enjoy listening to this interview absolutely as much as I enjoyed conducting it. So let's dive right in.
Successful real estate investing isn't all about we buy houses and motivated sellers. That's the lowbrow approach, and it gives real estate investing a slimy reputation. Gross. There is a better way, a more genuine, human approach. We are thoughtful real estate entrepreneurs, and this is sleaze-free real estate investing.
Okay, Robb Crocker, welcome to Sleaze-Free Real Estate Investing.
Yeah, happy to be with you, Jeff. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. No, I've been looking forward to having you share your story and your experiences with our audience. So why don't we just kind of start at the top? Tell everybody who you are. Why would I invite you onto a show like this?
Yeah. Like you said, my name is Robb Crocker. I've been an entrepreneur for over 20 years. Started a media production business back in 1999, and kind of caught the real estate bug in the early 2000s, and went down the path of buying initially some residential property, and then realized, I got some advice from some business mentors, and one of my mentors said the best thing he ever did was he bought his building to pay himself rent as a business owner. And another mentor of mine said his biggest regret was not buying a building to pay himself rent because he was making his landlord rich. So I determined pretty early on I wanted to own a building and pay myself rent. And so I did that in 2005, bought my first commercial building and moved my company into it, and fixed it up, used half of the building for myself and leased out the other half. And shortly after that, I found a partner, and we decided to do that multiple times in a suburb of Portland. And I was running my primary business. I ran it for almost just short of 20 years and did real estate kind of on the side. And what I realized was I built probably about 4 times more wealth owning the real estate and doing the real estate than I did actually owning my operating business. So it was eye-opening, to say the least.
Yeah. And so when you got that first building, the one that you were using for your business, in your mind, did you have an intention that said, hey, I'm gonna make this portfolio well beyond this building? Or was it really just kind of about having a place that you didn't have to pay rent to for somebody else? So how much intentionality was there at that exact moment?
At that exact moment, the intent really was to just own a building that, for all intents and purposes, my business would get, or I would basically get a space for free, because my business was paying rent to the building, which I owned now with a partner. But, all the additional income from leasing the extra space would basically pay the mortgage. So the intent was just to own one. But soon figured out how nice it was to be getting this extra income. That once it was set up and the building was fixed up, didn't take a whole lot of time, and I realized that was a pretty nice source of revenue for me and personal income. So that's when I decided. It probably took about a year before I decided, hey, I should do this a few more times. Yeah,
that was some good advice your mentors gave you there. The idea of not paying rent to somebody else.
Yep, totally. Now, and I know that's not the right solution for everyone, because I've talked, told my story to other entrepreneurs, and some of them, if you have to be in a downtown metropolitan area like downtown Seattle or LA or New York, it may not be a reality that you can actually do that. But for, I think, most entrepreneurs out there, there is an opportunity to do something similar to what I did, even if it means you have to go to a suburb of one of those major cities.
Yeah. And now, if I understand right, this topic of business owners owning their own real estate has become something that's really kind of grown into a passion for you, right? And you've kind of got a bit of a mission to try to help others where it seems like it might make sense for them.
Yeah, it has. What I realized is, so my business, it was a creative services company, and creative services companies and many other companies are like this. They have their periods of great success and massive cash flow, and they definitely have their periods of severe cash crunches. And oftentimes what ends up happening, and I saw this happen with many of my friends, is they do great for a number of years, and then all of a sudden they lose a key account, or they lose a key employee, or their landlord decides that they want to lease or tear down their building and do something different with it. And literally they can go from on top of the world one day to having to shut their business down the next. And I saw it happen too many times with folks who, had they owned their building and made payments towards the mortgage, they would have had an asset that had real value as opposed to having to shut down their business and maybe even owing money to creditors. So I just saw it as a way to try and enlighten and educate and help other entrepreneurs to realize, if at all possible, owning your own real estate is in most cases not at all a bad idea.
Yeah. You mentioned a few minutes ago the idea of 4x the wealth from the real estate than from the actual business itself. And that just made me think about, I'm personally always thinking about the distinction between wealth and income, making a living today, putting food on the table, but also then building something for the long term. And it seems like what your mission in helping other business owners has become is to help them also think about not just making money in the moment, but building something that 20 years from now they'll be really thanking themselves for.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. The cash flow on the type of real estate that I do is nice, and it definitely supports my lifestyle. But ultimately, at the end of the day, tenants paying the mortgage for me. I did some quick calculations about a year ago, and I realized that my tenants were basically increasing my net worth by 10 grand a month just from paying the principal on the mortgages I had on the buildings. That's just paying principal. It has nothing to do with inflation or property values increasing. So you just take the principal payoff, and your tenants or your renters are helping you create $10,000 a month in real equity in your future. So that alone, on top of some forced appreciation things we do with fixing buildings up and just natural inflation, you hold on to a building for 10, 15, 20 years, and you're building some serious wealth.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So the story kind of starts in about 2005. Now, I'd happen to know, because I know you well, that if we fast forward many years, you ultimately became sort of a major player in the town that you were doing business in. So tell us a little bit about what were the first couple investment deals where you weren't intending to use it as an owner-occupied business property. What were those first couple deals like? And then how did that set you on a path to having such a significant role in your town?
Yeah. That's one thing that there are a lot of smart people who say, concentrate or set your focus on one area of interest or one area of investment. And with me, what we ended up doing was we invested in a suburb of Portland. It's called Oregon City. It's a town of about 50,000 people. It's about 10 miles south of downtown Portland. And when we bought our first building in 2005, the town had it was struggling. The downtown core, Main Street, Oregon City, that downtown was it's the oldest city, incorporated city west of the Rockies. It's where the end of the Oregon Trail came. So has a long history. And when we first bought our first building there, the county used to have most of its offices down in that Main Street core. And about 2 years before we bought there, they had moved their offices. So a lot of the spaces were vacant. And that Main Street downtown core was really, really blighted. Not a whole lot going on there, but what I saw was opportunity. And the fact that we didn't have a ton of money probably played to our advantage. And the fact that it was so blighted definitely played to our advantage. I realized that with Portland and how it was growing, that there were going to have to be expansion into some of the suburbs. And I just really liked that quaint town. And so when we bought our first building there, we bought it through a broker. It was just listed. And we bought it on with seller financing. And it turned into a really good deal because the seller got to sell it to somebody. And it was a good deal. It wasn't, they weren't losing their shirt. And it was a great deal for us because we got to put less money down and show them that the reason we were doing that is because we were going to fix up the building because it had been neglected for probably over a decade. So, paint and remodeling and stuff. So we showed them if we put less money down and they carried the note, we would spend more money fixing the building up, which if we defaulted, then they would get their building back and it would be in a lot better shape and worth more. than if we were to just put a large down payment down on it and default. So, what we ended up doing was kind of trying to find the ugliest building on Main Street and seeing if we could purchase it, and then working the seller finance angle. We'd fix it up, we'd get it leased out, we'd go to a bank then and show them the net operating income, get it appraised, get a loan from the bank, pay off the private mortgage, and take the excess capital that we would get and go buy another building.
Yeah, it's a great rinse and repeat strategy there.
It worked really well.
And then I think what's also really cool about your scenario there is kind of within the bounds of downtown Oregon City. You know that expression that the rising tide raises all boats. Well, you were actually raising the tide yourself, and thus all of your boats, all of your buildings were increasing too, right? It's like you were almost creating your own comps. And by buying another building and fixing it up, then you increase the value of the buildings a block or two away that you already owned.
Yep. You're spot on there. That definitely did happen. I mean, of that downtown core, it's a unique area in that the actual downtown is geographically pretty small because of some just the land mass. There's not a whole ton of buildings. So yeah, in like a 2-block radius, we probably owned over half of the buildings. So you're exactly right. Now there was other folks coming in too and kind of getting on the train. And so there was probably 3 or 4 of us developers that were really doing downtown. But yeah, we helped the comps on everything because we were fixing things up, and the tide definitely lifted. And we were doing this in 2000. We started in 2005 also. And we went through the crash of 2008, 9, but Oregon City never really experienced that significant crash, mainly because it had never really got frothy and peaked. And the other thing was because there was still the courthouse downtown. It's a county seat. A lot of the office space was still being used by organizations, either private or public, that needed to be near the courthouse. So we never really experienced that huge drop off that most other real estate did. So we were very fortunate to be in the right place at the right time.
Yeah, absolutely. So then eventually you would diversify a little bit in your activities outside of Oregon City, right? First kind of close by a little bit, and then moving into other more rural parts of Oregon. But my question, I guess, for you is, I find this part really fascinating because one of the main premises of the way that I think and the way that I try to teach people is to make sure that we're going into areas with proven demand. And I really try to advise against like any type of real speculation about, well, I think this is the next hot area or anything like that. And I don't perceive that you have done any speculation at all, like, gambling essentially, but you have gone into smaller towns and you have had great success with that in markets that aren't, many hundreds of thousands or millions of people. So what do you think are what are some of the things you like about some of those smaller towns and some of the things that you believe have helped you be successful with this particular business strategy?
Yeah, I think my experience in Oregon City, I realized there was a few keys to our success, some of which obviously we played a role in, and others of which were because of the city and the surroundings and the circumstances. So one of those was I realized that we took great advantage of some of the grants and loans and incentives for redevelopment in Oregon City. They had an urban renewal district, which many states have, not all do. But urban renewals programs are basically a financing mechanism where, in a very brief nutshell, cities can borrow from the future to help fix up properties in the present, to help spur economic development so that the value of those properties will go up and create more taxes, so then they can pay off the loan that they take from the future. Oregon City, when we first got there, really did well in using that tool to help property developers and investors like myself do well to get grants and loans to help fix up the facades of our buildings. So that was very key. Another key was having a city government, both elected officials and city staff, like the mayor and city council, as well as city staff like the city manager and the staff of the city be on board with proactive development and economic development of the area. And we found that Oregon City at that time just had the perfect mix of a mayor with a can-do attitude, positive attitude, and a city staff that really wanted to see that downtown improve. So that was very important. And then the third thing that I found was very important was we had, shortly after I got there, I got involved with a group that started a Main Street program. So a Main Street program is a national program where it basically has a formula, if you will, to help these downtown cores, these main streets, mostly in smaller towns across the U.S., figure out how to fix up their downtowns for economic development and also for the enjoyment of the citizens. So helping to retain businesses, improve businesses, recruit businesses, get more activity, financial activity, economic development activity, and just life happening in these many times old kind of worn out downtowns across the U.S. So what I found was, having that perfect mix of urban renewal or, grants and funds available for economic development, having proactive and engaged city staff and city elected officials, and then also having the Main Street program really they all played key roles in us helping to turn those investments in Oregon City into something a lot greater. As we went through and bought a number of buildings in Oregon City, ultimately we ended up buying 8, and we fixed up 8 buildings and refinanced them. By the time we were done, it took us about 8 years. Most of the buildings in that downtown core that were blighted and really good values had been purchased and fixed up. So over the course of less than a decade, that downtown went from a blighted, ugly armpit to something that people in the metro area were really talking about. That's a cool place to be. So the values weren't there anymore, and I determined, I'd love to do this again. So I started looking for other cities around the state that had those key ingredients. Again, urban renewal or other grants available to help economic development, great elected officials and city staff, and then a Main Street program. And that's how I got involved with finding other smaller towns that I could kind of do the same thing in.
Wow. That is fantastic. And, it makes me really think about one of the things that I really like to distinguish between, I think actually is one of the first couple of episodes of this show, was talking about the difference between being a real estate investor and a real estate entrepreneur, right? And the name of the show, of course, is Sleaze-Free Real Estate Investing, but that's primarily because, people are searching for real estate investing when they're looking for a podcast. But I really think about entrepreneurship being a much more valuable and frankly exciting activity than being an investor. And as I listen to you talk about those experiences and the stories as you progressed through Oregon City and then moved into the other towns as well, it's very entrepreneurial, right? You weren't sitting there waiting for an opportunity to land itself on your desk that was already prepackaged, and all you had to do is just write a check and put it into somebody else's deal. Really, you were going out there and truly creating new opportunities, and kind of, eyes wide open, head on a swivel, those types of cliches, but seeing the opportunities around you that other people weren't necessarily seeing, and then going and creating those.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. And what I found was, especially in these small municipalities, there aren't a whole lot of real estate developers or investors looking to invest in these areas. So, oftentimes when you go in and say, "Hey, this is who I am. This is what I've done in this other area." For me, it was Oregon City. I'm looking for a new place to kind of invest in and be a part of. The city leaders and city staff that get it definitely welcome you in and they show you everything that they have and everything that they can do to help. Because for them, if they can get somebody to come in and buy and fix up some of these blighted buildings, it's huge for their cities. I mean, it not only helps the image, but it also helps their economic development efforts. So it is something where you definitely, it's not easy. It's not a simple formula, and it's not just to go in and get rich quick and flip some buildings type thing. You really do have to build relationships. You have to get to know the community. you have to operate in an ethical way, because especially these smaller towns, man, if you screw one person over, word gets out and you're done. So it's not, you can't go and hide in a big, huge metropolis. When you're working in these small towns, you really got to do right by the people and by the town. But what I found is if you do that, there's lots of doors that are open for you and lots of opportunities that present themselves because of that. Yeah,
absolutely. I think that's a great sort of segue to what I wanted to chat with you about next, which is, this isn't just your general generic real estate investing show. We really talk about what we call the thoughtful way. And there's a lot of things that sort of define, of course, what the thoughtful way is. But I think what you just hit on there with the small town dynamics and the reputational considerations and the ethics and all that kind of stuff is really an important part of this. So when you look back at the deals that you've done, what proportion of those would you say have been off-market deals versus on-market deals?
Yeah, good. That's a great question. In Oregon City, I think of the 8 buildings we purchased, 2 were actually brokered, so listed, that we went in and bought. The rest of them were off-market, so it's just from me being kind of down in that area. Now, keep in mind, I had my business down there, so I would walk the street every day and go to the coffee shop and the restaurants and get to know people. So when I saw a building that was being cleared out, oftentimes I would reach out to find out who the owner was and reach out and ask him or her, what their plans were. And that would sometimes turn into a buying opportunity. Mm-hmm. In the new towns I'm in, I'd say it's about half and half. Well, no, actually it's been 3/4 probably listed. And that's only because there aren't a whole lot of buyers in those areas. So they kind of tend to sit on the market for longer. And there's not a whole lot of creativity going on with buyers looking in those smaller areas. So they tend to sit longer. And so I guess in that regard, you do have a little bit more time that you can find them just regular and make offers. But what I found is as I've been spending more time in some of these other smaller rural areas, definitely word gets out and people start calling and reaching out to me because they hear about what's going on and what I'm doing. And they say that they have some property or they know of somebody or, you get to know a few key people who kind of know everything that's going on in the area and they'll share with you the info and then you can reach out to folks. And I found that that's been very fruitful as well. So, if I had to break it down and over, the whole portfolio, it's probably been half and half listed versus off market.
Okay. Yeah. I think that there are different schools of thought, of course, in the real estate investing world. But 2 of the ones that I'm always struck by are the idea that, you just do deals wherever the deals are, as long as the numbers make sense. It doesn't matter if you're, sitting on your couch in Portland and doing deals in Ohio, by text. And then there's the other school of thought, which is much more what I do and what I teach, which is have a smaller number of areas, but know them really, really, really well. And what I take from your story right there is that once you kind of enter a new area and you're kind of getting to know it, they're also getting to know you. And so you have to go look at the listed properties, but before too long, the opportunities start coming to you because you know the area well, they know you well, and you start to develop that reputation there too.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, another thing too, I don't want to minimize the investment that I'm making, not just of money, but also of my time and my attention. I've been very intentional about joining some groups, including the Main Street, economic development subcommittee in the new town I'm investing in, and also I've joined and paid membership dues to join a economic development group that's a kind of a regional group in that area, and go to all the board meetings. So. I'm involved in the community as well as just, spending money and time fixing up buildings in those areas as well. So, and that goes a long ways, especially in those smaller towns where they actually see you and they see that you're here and you're making an investment of time beyond just your real estate, that you really do want to kind of help the community. And to your earlier point, doing so really does help to lift all boats. You are part of the rising tide, so it definitely helps. And And I also like it too. I grew up in a small community in a small town, and I really do enjoy being a part of helping those towns kind of rise from the ashes again, if you will.
Yeah. Yeah. So in terms of the way that your deals tend to get negotiated, my perception is not that you are, sitting at your desk writing an offer that goes to your broker, that then goes to another broker, then goes to the seller, and then the counter comes back to the broker, to the other broker, and to you. And as I like to lovingly refer as two people yelling numbers at each other through brokers. I don't perceive that that's how things work for you at all, even when there are brokers involved. If you had to kind of like describe what you think your negotiation approach or style is, how would you describe that?
Yeah, I definitely subscribe to your line of thinking. I much prefer to talk directly to the sellers, and it's really important for me to try and get an idea of where their mind is and where their headspace is, and what are the challenges that they're facing, so I can try and structure a deal. And I've heard you talk about this too, that's mutually beneficial. So I know exactly, what is important to them. Is it a quick close? Is it monthly income for years? Is it a high sales price? And I try to structure offers that meet their needs. And often, and I've heard other people say this, I give them options. So I give them 3 options, option A, B, C, that have kind of a mix of different, down payments and seller carry, or all cash, or, closing terms. But I really, really try to think about what they want and try and get in their headspace and put myself in their shoes and make offers that benefit both of us.
Yeah. So it's probably safe to say most of your deals end up being pretty customized and tailored. It's not a one size fits all type of a thing that you end up applying to a lot of different deals. It's like a custom solution for each person.
Yep, absolutely. Yep, yeah. They're all custom.
Yeah. And then I know one thing, you mentioned it before, it's two of my favorite words that we talk about a lot here on the show, of course, seller financing. I know that has ended up being a big part of many of the deals that you have done, and like different forms of that, even, right? From note and trust deeds to lease option types of things. So what are some of the hallmarks, would you say, of your typical approach to seller financing, if there is such a thing as a typical approach for you?
Yeah, I think typical approach, and I touched on it briefly earlier, is to show, so the types of properties that I purchase are almost 99% value add. So I look for buildings that have been, a little neglected or maybe forgotten, or maybe it's a landlord who lives out of state and doesn't really see it very often. So I look things that need fixing up that I can force appreciation. So because I'm doing that, when I go to sellers, they know that it needs work. So my strategy really is to show them, hey, look, I'll give you some money. I'll put some money down to show you that, I'm serious. But I'm also showing you that, hey, here's how much money I plan on spending to fix up the building, to do the things both necessary and also the things that are going to help improve the marketability and ultimately the value of the property, and show them that by putting less money down, I'm able to spend more money on the improvements that increases the value of the asset. So if at some point I'm not able to follow through on the deal, they're going to get an asset back that's worth a lot more than when they sold it to me. So that's definitely key. That's definitely key to the offers that I tend to make.
Yeah. Have you had many experiences where you kind of tested the waters with the seller or with the broker, perhaps about seller financing? Maybe ask a question that sort of just test the waters a little bit, and the initial answer is, no, we're not interested in that. No, thank you. But then ultimately that is how the deal ended up getting done.
Yeah. And sometimes, I'll go in and ask about seller financing, and they're not really open to it. And a couple of times I've said, okay, I'll tell you what, I'll move forward with the due diligence. I'll still put down some earnest money. And I'll go to a bank, and you go to the banks, and, you don't get any banks that are willing to finance it because it does need so much work, or it's in a, smaller tertiary market. And then at that point, I go back to the seller and say, hey, look, either I'm going to have to back out, or we're going to have to figure out a way that you're willing to carry some financing, at least for a year or two, to give me time to fix it up and get it performing, so I can go to traditional financing. So, and most of the time when I've done that, they've seen that the light, and they've seen that really is their best option. Otherwise, they're just going to be sitting on it for a long time, or they're going to have to take a totally low ball, all cash offer from somebody else.
Yeah, absolutely. That's been my experience multiple times as well. And I often picture sort of maybe what you call the non-thoughtful real estate entrepreneurs, or sometimes I call them the lowbrow folks. I picture them standing in front of a seller with like a clipboard and like a questionnaire that they just start asking questions with really no kind of sensitivity, but just like, okay, number of bedrooms, great. Number of bathrooms, square feet. What's the lowest price you would take? Would you do seller financing? And just in this kind of crude, blunt instrument kind of way. And if they get the answer that says no on seller financing, they just accept that at face value. And what I've found is that that's a great initial insight, but that through the conversation, which my negotiations it's not one meeting and 15 minutes. It usually is weeks, and sometimes longer than weeks, of kind of getting to know somebody and evolving the conversation. But through that process, it does provide a great opportunity for them to kind of come to their own conclusions about the viability of different paths, where lots of things that started as no's became yeses eventually.
Totally. Yep. Absolutely. Yeah. I think, especially if sellers get somebody who they can see is genuinely interested in purchasing their property. And, when I run into a legitimate financing issue because the banks legitimately won't touch it, they can see that I'm being genuine, and they can see that they do need to, if they want the deal to move forward, they do have to be more flexible with seller financing. Yeah.
And you mentioned before, and then kind of alluded to it again just a moment ago, the idea of different options for a seller. And I'm always talking about the difference between proposals and offers. And I think a proposal is already framed in a way such that you could say, I've got a couple recommendations in my proposal that we could kind of take different paths here to get you where you're trying to go. Here's a couple different options. And it sounds like you have found that to be very helpful in not only the negotiation, but maybe even kind of the progression of the relationship. Is it safe to say that?
Absolutely. Yeah. And what's funny is, even though I put a lot of thought into, maybe offering three options, usually what ends up happening is, hey, we like the down payment of option A, but we really like the interest rate of option B and the terms of option B. So can we make a hybrid? And usually that's what happens, and then they feel like they were part of the process, not just saying yes or no. They're saying yes and.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that about proposals. I feel like when you give somebody a proposal, then the next thing you do is either literally or metaphorically, you're handing them a red pen and saying, tell me what you think. What do you like here? Star the thing that you like and cross out the thing that concerns you. And let's have this dialogue. And then it actually becomes a collaborative process rather than an argumentative process. Like the whole idea of sort of, I'm using finger quotes right now, if you could see me, counter offers it just bothers me really, because it takes out the whole potential extremely valuable element of collaborative discussion about how to take an idea and refine it.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're also not playing the whole game that's often in real estate negotiations with, well, I really want it for $1 million. So and he or she's asking $2 million, so I'm going to offer them $750, hoping that I can get close to that $1 million. You're not playing those games anymore. You're just you're showing them the numbers. You're saying, hey, this is what when it's all fixed up, this is the kind of income it's going to generate. The cap rates in the area are this, so you can see that the value ultimately is going to be this once all that work is done. And so this is what I can afford to pay you, and this is how we can make it happen. And then it is, you're not playing games. You are a collaborator, and I found that to work really, really well.
Yeah, for sure. So one of the things that really I love about your story and that I just admire so much about you is that you've made just an incredible amount of progress as a real estate entrepreneur while it wasn't even your full-time focus, right? You were running your other business primarily. And as I think about our audience here, of course, everybody listening has got different levels of experience, and there are different places in their lives and different needs and things like that. But to me, part of your story that's so incredibly encouraging is that you can make a lot of progress, and it doesn't have to be the thing that you pour 60 hours a week into doing solely. How do you feel like, or what were maybe some of the key elements you felt like of allowing you to make progress while it was still kind of like a sideline thing beyond your main business? Because there are people listening, a lot of them might have other businesses, but a lot of them also might have jobs. So tell that story if you can, about how you can make progress even if you don't have a full-time bandwidth to throw at it.
Yeah. I think if I look back at the last, I bought my first commercial building in 2005. So it's been 15 years. I've probably spent, while I had my main business, probably spent 5% of my time on real estate. And usually that time was, sometimes I'd go online and look for things, look for listings, but oftentimes it was just kind of being in the area and being in the know. So I would spend time in the evenings at home, or sometimes during lunch, kind of looking for things. I would do a lot of listening and learning, podcasts and books. But I found that, with the type of stuff that I do, it's more timing is everything. So it's kind of more being ready when an opportunity presents itself, as opposed to actively going out and hunting deals. I certainly could have done probably, 5 to 10 times more deals if that would have been my sole focus. But I was just kind of always had my finger on the pulse of what was going on in real estate around my area. And so I wasn't actively every day calling people or every day walking up and down the street, but I just had my finger on the pulse. So I would spend time when I had it, but I didn't have to spend time if I didn't want to. It was more opportunity. And, for some folks, they may not be in that position, but for others, that might be a good thing. If you know that there's an area that you know well, or you think is up and coming, just to keep your finger on the pulse, get to know the players, and kind of be ready for when that opportunity presents itself. Be ready to go and make that offer. Another thing that played into my success was I had experience with rehab and construction and things. So when we did get a project, I could do some of the work or know what needed to be done. On the same token, I also had a partner who joined me after I purchased my first building, and he also had that kind of experience too. And this wasn't his full-time gig either. So he and I kind of divided some of the activities as well. So that definitely played a role and was helpful. But I would say to anybody who isn't doing real estate full-time or wants to start getting into it while they also have a full-time gig, you've heard it many times. It's just a matter of taking the time and nights and weekends. And as long as you really enjoy doing it, it shouldn't be that hard to find the time to do that and study and make offers. I mean, the worst thing can happen if you make an offer is somebody says no. I mean, that's the worst thing that can happen. Sometimes I'll make an offer and they accept it. I'm like, oh crap, I almost feel like that's worth it. I got a tiger by the tail now. But I think making offers is key. And like I said, you always are going to have due diligence period where you can back out if something doesn't work out. But making offers just is awesome, and just finding the time in your day or nights or weekends. And you don't have to be actively pushing it all the time if it's not your full-time gig, but just being ready, just being ready for that moment, and then pulling the trigger when that opportunity presents itself is also very important.
Yeah, those are great points. I guess you have to be in the arena if you want to get to play, but that doesn't mean that has to be the only thing you focus on. But then for some people, they might, as they have progress and success like you did, then they can themselves make a transition. And that's what you did, right? In the last couple of years, is that you sort of transitioned from real estate being your your side hustle, so to speak, to being your full-time focus. Can you tell us a little bit about that transition?
Yeah. So I did. I ran my other business, my primary business, for just short of 20 years, and I ended up selling it to a couple of my employees, which was great. It's a great deal for them. It's a really good deal for me. And with the little bit of capital that I got from that, I redeployed that into real estate. One of the things we didn't talk about at all yet was the Opportunity Zones program. And when that first was launched, I learned a ton about that. And so a number of the communities I invested in also are Opportunity Zones. And I realized that I thought that the timing was right for me to transition out of my first business into what I really love now, which was real estate, and also investing in these smaller communities. And then on top of that, having the financial benefits and tax incentives of the Opportunity Zones, it just seemed like the opportune time. I can't stress enough how important timing has been in my successes and my failures. I've definitely had failures, and it was just the wrong time, maybe the right project at the wrong time. But I just felt like the timing was right to make that transition, and I'm really, really glad that I did.
Okay, Rob, so that's great. Let's talk a little bit about Opportunity Zones, because I know that you've actually become one of the most knowledgeable people in Oregon, probably, if not even beyond, on that exact topic. I know it really kind of captured your entrepreneurial spirit and your sense of opportunity. Tell us a little bit about what made you latch onto that so strongly.
Yeah, so I think early on, I certainly was very knowledgeable, and I would even go to meet with attorneys and CPAs and pay them to teach them about it, because they just didn't know a whole lot. They had many, many other things to think about, and I was really studying this. I think that's probably subsided now. I'm sure there's people who know a ton more in the state than I do now. But initially, I just saw it as a real opportunity for, again, these rural areas that really, really needed help with economic development and help, just eliminating the blight that had taken over a lot of these communities that had lost so much economic development with, just the transition out of, a natural resource-based economy to an evolving economy. And a lot of these rural areas have been left behind, and many of which are in these Opportunity Zones. So I saw that as a real chance, opportunity to go in and both help these communities while also, really doing well financially by taking blighted buildings, fixing them up, getting the tax benefits from the Opportunity Zones laws, and really having a win-win. So yeah, I was very, very excited by it, and actively searched for not only the trifecta with the urban renewal or public funds available, with the city leadership and the Main Street programs, but also on top of that, if you could add that it was also in an Opportunity Zone, that's kind of like the quadfecta of perfection in regards to what I saw for wanting to invest in the community. So that has played a role certainly in what I've done. And what I've also realized is, the Opportunity Zones legislation, a lot of the folks and a lot of the banter around it has been how it's gone to subsidize projects that would have already been done. So projects in downtown Portland per se, or downtown LA or Denver or these areas. And it's come under fire from a lot of folks saying it's just helping the rich get richer. But my counter has been initially that's where the easy money is going to go. And especially these big, huge funds, be it, family offices or hedge funds. But, these Opportunity Zones can do a lot of really good things and present a lot of benefits for these rural towns that really need it. And I think what will happen is, once the low hanging, fruit from these, these major metropolitan areas get picked, that hopefully, my hope is that more and more investors will start looking towards the rural areas and really help to eliminate some of the blight and help the economic development of these towns and these counties and areas that really need the help.
Yeah, now that makes great sense. And it reminds me of, a few minutes ago when you were talking about urban renewal incentives in some of the towns that you'd worked in. I sort of put the Opportunity Zone concept in a similar category, in the sense that it's yet another kind of arena that you can bring your entrepreneurship to. And that again, you're not just sitting there waiting for these things to show up, these opportunities, but you're actually saying, okay, well, there's this whole category of possibility with these urban renewal incentives, perhaps. There's this whole category of possibility with opportunity zones. What can I go out and create that doesn't exist right now? And so to me, it just comes back to that idea of entrepreneurship in real estate. Like, to me, you are an entrepreneur in the real estate field rather than, a real estate investor. And to me, the whole opportunity zone thing just further kind of emphasizes that point.
Absolutely. And there's, we talk about urban renewal, we talk about opportunity zones, but there's also, especially for, again, these historic properties and also rural properties, there's other grants and loans and things available to investors who are willing to invest in these types of projects, because governments and NGOs know that there are real issues investing in old historic properties or in rural communities. So there are incentives in addition to just urban renewal. For instance, our state has a state Main Street office that they have funds available from historic preservation to give grants for helping to improve old historic buildings. So, of the properties that I've purchased with my partner, 100% of them are older than were built before 1930. So we deal entirely in old historic structures, and I love history, and I love trying to preserve these things. And so we've gotten grants from the state to help with preservation, it takes effort. But for instance, we purchased a building for $825,000. We're fixing it up. We're going to spend about probably $600,000 fixing it up. But we also got a grant from the state for $200,000 as part of that. Wow. You just can't do that with single family homes. You can't. It's very hard to get those kind of grants where they're giving you basically 25% of your purchase price to help fix up the building for large buildings or for warehouses. It just doesn't happen. Now, obviously there are hoops you have to jump through and you have to apply, and there are things, but there can be real benefits to that. And it's not only good for you as an investor, but it's also good for the property, because you're going to be able to spend more money to fix it up, and ultimately it'll be good for the community too. So, there are definitely, this type of investing that we do is not easy. It's not a go in and fix and flip. It does take more effort, but the benefits beyond just the financial benefit, I really speak to me and to my partner and our investors. And so that's why we do it.
Yeah. That's super cool. And I love too that you're pursuing types of things that they're not on everybody's radar. That's one of the things that it kind of just makes me roll my eyes a little bit about so much of the sort of standard real estate investing industry, is that everybody's kind of going after the same thing, and vacant houses and distressed sellers. And it's like everybody and their dog is pursuing the same model, the same exact properties even. And here you've gone into an area where there are fewer eyeballs, fewer people who are trying to tune into the opportunity that you're seeing there. And thus, to a great degree, I think there's less competition. It's probably, like you said, it doesn't make the whole project easy, but that's a different deal when you can, sit down with the constituents and the players involved and work out custom tailored opportunities to solve certain very specific problems. It's more of probably less of a bidding kind of situation and more of just hey, let's sit down and work out a plan together.
Absolutely. Yeah. And this type of investing, if you like people and you like building relationships, this is a fantastic type of investing to do, because it really is relationship driven. It really is. And I really do enjoy that part of it for sure.
Yeah. Well, this has been super fun. I want to kind of put a bow on this for everybody listening, because I just want to make sure everybody is getting to me what the key takeaways of this are. That you can be a regular person with an open mind and an entrepreneurial spirit, and if you bring a thoughtful and relationship oriented approach, keep your eyes open for opportunity, and just consistently keep showing up, you can make an unbelievable amount of progress in life, but in real estate and in building wealth and building a business. And that to me should be extremely encouraging to so many people, who are listening, because most people, when they want to get started in real estate, they feel like their obstacles are availability of money and time and knowledge, and none of those things got in your way. I mean, you didn't necessarily show up with, a couple $1 million in your checkbook ready to just go buy some stuff. You didn't know everything at the very beginning. You didn't have infinite time. You had a whole nother job, not to mention, being a dad and a husband and all sorts of other stuff. But yet through that consistent effort applied in a thoughtful and, I would say, relational manner, you've made incredible progress. I just hope everybody is hearing that and understanding how that can apply to them too.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's one thing, I listen to podcasts all the time, and it's always fun to hear the numbers. So if you don't mind, I'd love to share just, maybe an example of, our type of thing. And I have said that we like to buy distressed properties that we can force appreciation. And, probably I'll give you two examples. One is our best kind of home run that, was just amazing. And then another that's kind of more typical. Our best project ever was a large building we bought in downtown Oregon City that was built in 1907. And it was an old Masonic lodge, and it's 40,000 square feet. It's 4 stories with a basement. And we purchased it for $925,000, and we offered 25 over asking because we knew we really wanted it and we wanted to incentivize seller financing. So we got it. We ended up spending a little bit of money just to kind of do some initial fixing up while we looked for a significant tenant because it was mostly vacant. Well, we were fortunate, and again, timing is so key in this, but we were fortunate to sign a lease with the county district attorney who wanted to consolidate some offices around that area. So we ended up leasing 2 of the 4 floors to the district attorney. They ended up spending about $1.2 million doing the tenant improvements on their floors. We had to spend about another $300,000 doing some exterior, like brand new paint and interior stuff and new upgrading electrical and such. But when it was all said and done, about within 2 years after purchasing the property, the building then appraised at $4 million. So we got it refinanced and pulled our capital back out, and we have an amazing tenant that's the county that pays on time every month, and that was a real home run. And plus, it turned a building that was a real eyesore on Main Street into one of the nicest looking buildings on Main Street. So, obviously those type of deals don't come around every day. And there was certainly risk because when we bought it, it was probably 80% vacant. And the amount of money we were getting from rent was barely enough to cover, the expenses, the mortgage and the expenses. So there was certainly risk there. And that wouldn't have been a project I would have wanted to do my first project, but that's an example of something that can go really well. Kind of a more average one is, most recently we purchased a property in an opportunity zone in rural Oregon. We bought it. It's a 20,000 square foot building. No, I'm sorry, 10,000 square foot building, 2 stories. It had been mostly vacant for almost 10 years. We purchased it for $165,000. It was built in 1920s. And because of rural Oregon, and I think this is true of most rural areas in the country, housing is in such short supply. We turned the upstairs. It was vacant and was built originally as a motel in the 1920s. It had been gutted because there was a fire in it in 1994, and it had just been left. So we went in and we're redoing the apartments. They should be ready in a couple months. And once those are done, just based on market rates, we're leaving the downstairs as retail space, and the upstairs we're going to have 10 apartments. They'll be small, but that's going to generate probably $9,000 to $10,000 in income a month. And, once it's all said and done, even at a high cap rate of 9%, that property should be worth, between $800,000 and $1 million after spending $165 to purchase it and another $400,000 to do the rehab. So, and those are the kind of opportunities that are available. I'm certain all over the country, in some of these rural areas where you can buy buildings that have good bones, that are really inexpensive, that sellers are willing to do seller financing, and you build the right product. In this case, it's leaving retail on the bottom floor and rebuilding housing on the top. And you can do really well for yourself financially while also really helping the community. They're all on board because they need housing desperately, and they need these old buildings, these old blighted buildings fixed up. So it's a real win-win. So these are the types of deals that a person can find in some of these rural communities. It just takes work.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you sharing those specific examples too. And, I always think about how numbers are just so relative to certain areas, and, regular single family home in Seattle is, $700,000 or $800,000. It might be $30,000 somewhere else. But the principle behind what you just said is so important. I mean, I think there's multiple principles, but as I was struck by the Masonic Lodge example, a person very well might say, understandably to themselves, oh, come on. There's no way anybody would ever come in and spend more than the purchase price of the building on tenant improvements and not even on the building. Well, it maybe seems like it wouldn't happen, but it obviously did happen. And I think that, if we suspend our disbelief sometimes on like what is possible in certain scenarios, then a lot more possibility gets opened up. But there are a lot of people who would probably look at that and say, well, that just doesn't make sense. I would never pursue that. But if you never try, then you'll never find yourself in that exact position.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think too, what I've learned even this last 2 years is I may have a formula that worked well in, for instance, Oregon City, but when I was looking in some of these other rural areas, what I realized was, our model in Oregon City had been to fix up the retail on the bottom and fix up office space on the upper floors. But in these rural areas, there's not a whole lot of need for upper floor office space. And when I went in there, building up my pro formas based on office space, and it just never penciled. And then, the agent who I was looking at this particular listed property with said, well, if you turn these offices into apartments, you'd make, $600 per apartment. I'm like, what? Like, that's like 3 times more than you can get for office space. And I realized, depending on the area, you kind of have to shift your way of thinking about what is the best and highest use of that real estate, and what is going to benefit what's in demand in the community, what's going to benefit the community, and how can you alter your preconceived, or how can I alter my preconceived notions of the formula that works to something that actually will work, both financially and for the community. And that was a big eye opener as well. And I think, again, going into any new area or a new community, just being open to the possibilities and not being rigid in the way you think about investment, but being flexible and figuring out ways to make things work, I think is, it's just so much fun to go through those thought exercises and to be creative like that. And that, again, to your point, that's part of being an entrepreneur, is looking at problems and challenges and finding unique solutions. And it's really exciting, and it's very rewarding.
Yeah. Oh, that is so cool. And that exact story too really speaks to the value of having the insight of great team members on your team, local boots on the ground team members as well, right? That was an insight that was, really sparked by somebody. But then, then that makes me think, well, if he understood that, why isn't he doing this project? But yet again, there's that sort of lack of belief that says, oh no, this must not work. Because obviously they would just be doing it themselves if that made sense, but that's not true.
Yeah. And I found too that, especially with these old buildings that you're doing, forced appreciation, value add, it's just a lot of work. And a lot of people just are risk averse. And, when you're digging into these old buildings, you're always going to have surprises pop up. And there aren't a whole lot of people who enjoy tackling those surprises. So, again, that just points to the fact that there's a lot less competition doing the kind of things that we've been doing. So a real opportunity for folks who want to put in the time and actually make it happen.
Yeah. Well, Robb, this has been super enjoyable, and I know everybody listening is getting a ton out of this too, inspiration, but also some great strategic direction from you too. So I just want to thank you so much for that.
My pleasure. Yeah, happy to be on the show. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And if people wanted to reach out to you, ask you any questions, or connect with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, LinkedIn is probably the best spot for me. It's just Robb C. Crocker on LinkedIn. Robb with 2 B's.
Okay. All right. Great. Well, thank you again so much for being here. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure, Jeff.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that interview as much as I enjoyed conducting it. There's so much to learn from Robb about real estate and entrepreneurship and just the principles of creating opportunity and looking at some areas and some things and some deals and opportunities that other people might not see. If you take away one thing from this, I hope it is the following: that you can make incredible strides as a real estate investor and entrepreneur without it necessarily being your number one full-time focus. Thanks again for listening to Sleaze-Free Real Estate Investing. Again, please do us and do yourself a big favor by hitting the subscribe button in your podcast app right now, real quick, so that you'll know the second the next episode is released. And as a reminder, you can find show notes, including a transcript for this episode and this interview at thoughtfulre.com/E32. Until next time, this is Jeff from The Thoughtful Real Estate Entrepreneur signing off. Hey there, fellow thoughtful real estate entrepreneurs. Before we dive into today's episode, I just wanted to take a moment and acknowledge that we are in times right now that give new meaning to the word unprecedented, but it also creates incredible opportunity for those of us who do business ethically like we do as thoughtful real estate entrepreneurs. I recorded a special training video that I'd like for you to go watch. Go to sellerrelationsmastery.com/free, because in this video, I explain to you why this is the absolute perfect storm of ethical opportunity for people who do business the way we do. And because the times that we find ourselves in are unprecedented, that calls for unprecedented actions and decisions and offers in other ways. And so I was inspired by what I saw other leaders doing, and I've decided to offer you my signature real estate entrepreneurship course, a 6-module video course with worksheets as well, for absolutely free for a limited time. Because right now, you've probably got some extra time on your hands. You might have some extra concerns about money, and you need some strategies to shore that situation up. You might be wanting to take this time and invest it in your own self-development, and I want to support that, because the world needs right now and in the very near future our talents as thoughtful real estate entrepreneurs more than they ever have. So go to sellerrelationsmastery.com/free right now. Watch the training video. Download this idea from me about why right now is the time when you are called to serve and the time that you have to create even more stability in your own life and in your own family. On that page, you can sign up for the free course. Don't miss this opportunity, and I can't wait to see you inside. Now on to the episode.
Thanks for listening to Sleaze-Free Real Estate Investing. Remember, solve the person to unlock the deal, and solve the financing to unlock the profits.